Welcome to Alien Whispers. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Now, let's dive into the story. Caleb's eyes snapped open, his vision swimming through a haze of thick, acrid smoke. He coughed, his lungs searing as if scorched by fire. His head pounded, and for a fleeting moment, he couldn't place himself. Then it hit, the shuttle. The crash. He was alive, but only just. He forced himself upright, pain lancing through his side. His ribs ached, possibly cracked, but nothing felt broken. The shuttle's interior was a mangled ruin. Twisted metal, sparking wires, and a fine layer of red dust from Salon's surface coating everything. The hole gaped open in jagged tears, letting the planet's harsh light filter through. The last thing he remembered was the navigation system failing, alarms screaming, the shuttle spiraling out of control. There'd been no time to react before the impact. Now, scanning the wreckage, he saw his crew, still strapped into their seats, their bodies charred beyond recognition by the fire that had torn through the cabin. Grief clawed at his chest, but he shoved it down. Survival came first. He unbuckled his harness and climbed out, wincing with every step. His technician's uniform was torn, stained with his own blood, but he was standing. That was enough for now. Outside, Salon's alien landscape stretched before him. Twin suns hung low, casting an orange glow over jagged mountains shrouded in haze. The ground was a treacherous mix of red dust and sharp rocks, each step a gamble. The air was hot, dry, and eerily silent, save for the faint hiss of the shuttle's cooling engines. He couldn't stay here. The crash site was a beacon, and if the navigation system had been sabotaged, as he suspected, someone might come to ensure no survivors remained. He needed shelter, a plan. Caleb scavenged the wreckage, salvaging a pack with ration bars, a water purifier, and a first aid kit. His utility knife remained clipped to his belt, a reassuring weight. Around his neck hung a scarred data crystal, a relic from his past. It held the last photos of his family and his father's final warnings, recorded before their execution on Epsilon Colony 7 years ago. The memory surged unbidden. He'd been 16 when corporate mercenaries seized the colony, slaughtering anyone who resisted. His parents and sister, vocal advocates for workers' rights, were among the first killed, their bodies displayed as a warning. Caleb had cowered in a maintenance shaft, the screams of his sister echoing in his ears. The crystal was his only tether to them, a reminder of the cost of silence. Shaking off the memory, he pressed on. Who had sabotaged the shuttle? Was it tied to his past or something new? Salon's history was turbulent. A fallen matriarchal monarchy, a brutal coup, now a military regime under Telvin. Caleb had dismissed it as distant politics during his briefing. Now, stranded, it was his reality. The terrain was merciless. Red dust clung to his skin, and the sun's heat bore down like a physical weight. He trudged through the mountains, boots sinking into soft earth. The silence unnerved him, broken only by wind howling through the rocks. As the suns dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows, Caleb spotted a narrow crevice in a rock face, a cave barely visible. It was his best shot at shelter. He approached warily, hand on his knife. The crevice widened into a shallow chamber, its depths cloaked in shadow. He flicked on his belt-mounted light, its beams slicing through the darkness. Then he froze. Against the far wall crouched a figure, humanoid, female, and in dire condition. Gaunt, with burns scarring her skin, she wore tattered rags that might once have been fine garments. Her face was striking. High cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes glowing gold, and faint silver patterns shimmering faintly. Around her neck hung a broken diadem, its dull jewels hinting at royal craftsmanship. She was Selenian, and the symbol on her wrist, the royal mark, meant she was no ordinary survivor. She was the heir, lost after the coup. Caleb's pulse quickened. He'd stumbled into something massive. Before he could speak, her eyes flashed open, and she hissed, "Touch me again, human, and I'll show you a monster you won't survive." Caleb froze, hand outstretched, heart pounding. The woman's golden eyes blazed with fear and fury, her cracked lips baring sharp teeth. She clutched the broken diadem like a lifeline, her skeletal frame tense against the cave wall. "I'm not going to hurt you," Caleb said, voice steady. He lowered his hand and stepped back, keeping his movement slow. "I'm stranded too. My shuttle crashed. I'm just trying to survive." Her gaze didn't waver, but she didn't lunge. After a long moment, she eased slightly, though suspicion lingered. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice rough like gravel. "To help," Caleb said. "You look like you need it." She laughed, a bitter rasp. "Help from human? That's new." Despite her words, she didn't recoil when Caleb offered a ration bar. She snatched it, tearing into it with desperate hunger, her eyes locked on him. As she ate, Caleb studied her. The symbol on her wrist was unmistakable, the royal mark. He'd heard of the coup. The queen murdered, her daughter vanished. This had to be her. "You're her," he whispered. The air. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, hand covering the mark too late. "If you know who I am, you know what happens if you try to capture me," she said, voice low and lethal. "I'm not after bounties," Caleb said, shaking his head. "I'm trying to survive. Maybe we can help each other." She stared, then nodded faintly. "Maybe, but we can't stay here. Telvin's men are everywhere." "Who's Telvin?" Caleb asked. "The one who killed my mother and stole the throne," she said, venom in her tone. "He's hunting me. If he finds me, I'm dead." Caleb's stomach nodded. He'd landed in a war zone, but surviving Salon alone was impossible. He needed an ally, and she was it. "All right," he said. "Let's work together. What's your name?" A pause. "Lada," she said. "My name is Lada." "I'm Caleb," he replied. "Good to meet you, Lada." She didn't answer, but a flicker crossed her eyes. Hope or desperation. Their fates were now bound. As night fell, Caleb used his first aid kit to treat Lada's burns. She sat in tense silence, flinching at his touch but not pulling away. The cave's air was cool, the only sound the wind's eerie whistle. She didn't thank him, but she didn't threaten him either. Days passed in their refuge. Lada grew stronger, accepting Caleb's food and water with less suspicion. Her burns healed, revealing iridescent skin. Yet she remained guarded, her golden eyes glowing in the dark, watching him. On the fifth night, by a small fire Caleb had built, Lada spoke beyond curt replies. "I didn't flee," she said abruptly, voice stronger but heavy with pain. Caleb looked up from a communicator he was repairing, hoping it might send a distress signal. He said aside. "What happened?" he asked. Lada stared into the flames. "My mother, the queen, was strangled in her chambers. I watched from a hidden passage. Those we trusted turned on us." Her fingers traced the symbol on her wrist. "Telvin rules the capital now. The council obeys him out of fear. The people suffer in silence." "How did you survive?" Caleb asked. "Loyal servants got me out. We were hunted. They died for me." Her voice broke. "I've been hiding, moving constantly, until a raid left me wounded and alone." She paused, then met his gaze with fierce intensity. "There's a place free of Telvin's reach, Samaur, a city of outcasts in the western mountains. Loyalists might be there." Caleb weighed his options. Rescue was unlikely. The mission was classified, the crash site remote. "I could take you there," he offered, surprising himself. Lada's laugh was sharp. "You a human? The scorched lands, ash valleys, Telvin's patrols. You don't know what's out there." "I've survived this long," Caleb said. "What's in it for you, human?" she asked. He thought of the shuttle, his dead crew, the betrayal. "A purpose," he said. "Better than dying alone on an alien world." Lada studied him, firelight dancing on her silver-marked face. "No one follows a human on Salon," she said. "I'm not asking them to," Caleb replied. "I'm offering to help you get where you need to go, to walk like someone who was never meant to kneel." A spark flared in her eyes. Hope quickly veiled. "We leave at dawn," she said, resolve hardening her voice. As they trudged through the scorched lands of Salon, the twin suns beat down mercilessly, casting long shadows across the barren terrain. Caleb and Lada walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of their past heavy on their shoulders. Caleb broke the silence first. I never thought I'd end up on an alien planet, fighting for survival, he said, his voice tinged with irony. I was just a technician doing my job. Lotta glanced at him, her golden eyes reflecting the harsh light. And yet, here you are, helping me, she replied softly. Why? Caleb shrugged. Maybe because I know what it's like to lose everything. To have your world torn apart by people who think they're above the law. He paused, then continued. 7 years ago, on Epsilon Colony, corporate mercenaries took over. My parents and sister were killed because they spoke out against the injustice. I hid, like a coward, while they were executed. Lotta's expression softened. You were just a boy, she said. There's no shame in surviving. But I didn't just survive, Caleb said bitterly. I ran. I kept my head down, followed orders, and tried to forget. Until now. Lotta nodded understandingly. Sometimes, running is the only way to fight another day. She fell silent for a moment, then spoke again, her voice heavy with regret. I trusted the wrong person. Telvin was my mother's guard captain. I thought he was loyal, but he betrayed us. He killed her, and now he rules Salon with an iron fist. Caleb looked at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. It's not your fault, he said gently. You couldn't have known. But I should have, Lotta insisted. There were signs, warnings I ignored. I was arrogant, thinking I could handle it. And now, my people suffer because of my mistake. They walked on, the silence between them now companionable rather than awkward. As the day wore on, they found a small outcrop that provided some shade, and Caleb suggested they rest for a while. While Lotta sat down, wincing as she adjusted her position, Caleb noticed the burns on her arms were still raw. Let me take a look at those, he said, pulling out his first aid kit. Lotta hesitated, then nodded. As Caleb carefully applied the antiseptic, she tensed but didn't pull away. The coolness of the gel against her skin was a relief, and she let out a small sigh. You're good at this, she remarked, watching him work. Practice, Caleb replied with a wry smile. When you're a technician on a colony, you learn to patch up all sorts of things, machines, people, yourself. Lotta smiled faintly. Thank you, she said softly. Caleb finished bandaging her arms and sat back. So, tell me more about Salon. What was it like before Telvin? Lotta's eyes lit up with a mix of pride and sorrow. Salon was beautiful. Our society was matriarchal, led by queens who ruled with wisdom and strength. We had grand ceremonies, festivals that celebrated our history and culture. The royal family was revered, not just for their power, but for their role as protectors of the people. She paused, her voice dropping. But Telvin changed all that. He brought in his military, crushed dissent, and turned Salon into a police state. Now, fear rules instead of justice. Caleb listened intently, absorbing the information. And Samar? What's that like? Samar is different, Lotta said. It's a city of outcasts, those who refuse to bow to Telvin. It's hidden in the western mountains, a place where the old ways are still remembered. If we can reach it, we might find allies. As they prepared to continue their journey, a distant sound reached their ears, the rhythmic thud of boots and the low growl of beasts. Lotta's eyes widened. Patrol, she whispered. We need to hide. They quickly found a narrow crevice in the rocks and squeezed inside, holding their breath as the patrol passed by. The beasts sniffed the air, but Caleb's earlier efforts to mask their scent with dust seemed to work. The patrol moved on, unaware of their presence. The journey across Salon's ash valleys was relentless. The air was thick with fine gray dust that clung to their skin and clogged their lungs with every breath. The twin suns blazed overhead, their heat oppressive, sapping their strength with each step. Caleb and Lotta trudged on, their water supply dwindling dangerously low. The landscape was a monotonous expanse of gray, broken only by the occasional jagged rock formation. There was no sign of life, no birds, no insects, just the endless stretch of ash and dust. As they crested a small rise, Lotta pointed to a dry riverbed in the distance. There used to be water there, she said. If we're lucky, there might still be some beneath the surface. They made their way to the riverbed, but upon arrival, they found it completely dry, the cracked mud testament to its long abandonment. Caleb knelt down and began to dig with his hands, the ash mixing with his sweat to form a gritty paste. Lotta joined him, and together they excavated a small hole. After what felt like hours, they hit moisture. Carefully, they scooped out the silt of water, filtering it through a piece of cloth from Caleb's pack. It wasn't much, barely enough to wet their parched throats, but it was something. They shared it in silence, each taking small sips, knowing they had to make it last. As night fell, they found a small alcove in the rocks to rest. The temperature dropped sharply, and they huddled together for warmth, their bodies close but not touching, a silent agreement between them. In the morning, they continued their trek, the landscape changing subtly. The ash gave way to rocky terrain, with deep fissures and narrow paths that required careful navigation. Lotta led the way, her knowledge of Ceylon's geography invaluable. Suddenly, Lotta stopped, holding up a hand for silence. Caleb froze, listening intently. In the distance, he heard the faint hum of engines and the bark of commands. Another patrol. "They're getting closer," Lotta whispered. "We need to find cover." They spotted a narrow fissure in the rock face and slipped inside, just as the patrol came into view. The soldiers were accompanied by large, snarling beasts, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Enhanced, no doubt, by Telvin's technology. Caleb held his breath as the patrol passed by their hiding spot, the beasts sniffing the air suspiciously. One of them paused, its head turning towards the fissure, but then it moved on, apparently satisfied that there was nothing there. Once the patrol was out of sight, Caleb and Lotta emerged, relief washing over them. "That was too close," Caleb said, his voice shaky. Lotta nodded. "We have to be more careful. Telvin's forces are everywhere." As they continued, the terrain became even more treacherous. The path narrowed, forcing them to walk single file, with sheer drops on either side. Caleb's heart pounded as he followed Lotta, trusting her to lead them safely. After what seemed like hours, they reached a plateau overlooking a vast plain. In the distance, they could see the shimmering lights of Samhour, a beacon of hope. But their relief was short-lived. As they descended the plateau, they heard the unmistakable sound of another patrol approaching. This time, there was no cover, no place to hide. Lotta grabbed Caleb's arm. "Run," she urged, and they took off, sprinting across the open ground. The patrol spotted them almost immediately, and the chase was on. Caleb could hear the beasts closing in, their growls growing louder with each passing second. Just when it seemed like they were cornered, Lotta veered sharply to the left, leading them toward a cluster of boulders. "In here," she shouted, pointing to a narrow gap between two rocks. They squeezed through just as the first beast reached them, its claws scraping against the stone. Safe for the moment, they caught their breath, listening as the patrol searched the area. After a while, the sounds faded, and they emerged cautiously. The lights of Samhour were closer now, but so was the danger. Lotta's recovery was striking. Her silver facial markings, once faded and dim, now pulsed with a soft, radiant glow, as if her resolve had ignited them from within. She carried herself with newfound authority, her spine straight, her movements deliberate. Her voice, once a hoarse whisper, now resonated with a quiet strength that commanded attention. Caleb observed the change with quiet respect, seeing in her the emergence of a leader forged by hardship. By a small fire one evening, its flickering light casting shadows on the rocky walls of their shelter, Caleb's thoughts turned inward. He traced the scars on the data crystal hanging around his neck, its surface a map of his past pain. 7 years ago, he had cowered in a maintenance shaft on Epsilon Colony, listening to his sister's screams as corporate mercenaries executed his family. He had survived by running, hiding, and burying his grief. But now on Ceylon, he felt a shift. Helping Lotta wasn't just about survival. It was about purpose. For the first time since that day, he felt alive, tethered to something greater than himself. Lotta's voice broke his reverie. "You're different now, Caleb," she said, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not the man I met in that cave, scrambling to stay alive." Caleb met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're not the same either. You were half dead, ready to fight me with your last breath. Now look at you, ready to take on Telvin." She chuckled, a rare sound that softened her features. "We've both found something to fight for. That's what keeps us going." He nodded, his fingers tightening around the data crystal. "This used to be a weight, a reminder of what I lost. Now it's different. It's proof I can choose to be more than a survivor." Lada's expression grew serious. "Then we choose together. For Salon, for your family, for everyone Telvin has crushed." Their conversation shifted to the journey ahead. Lada described Semaur, a city carved into the western mountains, a refuge for those who defied Telvin's tyranny. "It's a place of hope," she said, "but also danger. The outcasts there are fierce, loyal to the old ways, but they won't trust easily, especially not a human." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So, we'll need to prove ourselves. What's the biggest threat getting there?" "The Ash Plains," Lada replied, her tone grim. "They're wide open, no cover, and Telvin's patrols roam them with enhanced beasts. We'll need to move at night, stay low, and pray we're not spotted." Caleb considered this. "Night travel makes sense. We can use the stars for navigation, and I can tweak our gear to mask our heat signatures. It won't fool them completely, but it'll buy us time." Lata nodded, impressed. "Good. We'll also need supplies. Water's scarce out there, and we can't rely on finding food. We'll have to ration what we have." Over the next few days, they prepared meticulously. Caleb repaired their salvaged equipment, coaxing a battered communicator back to life in hopes of a distress signal. Lada scoured the surrounding area, teaching Caleb which of Salon's sparse plants were edible. She pointed out a thorny shrub with bitter but nourishing berries and a root that could be chewed for hydration. Their teamwork was seamless, each leaning on the other's strengths. They shared quiet moments of laughter, swapping stories of their pasts. Lada's childhood in the royal palace, Caleb's tinkering with colony tech as a boy. One afternoon, as they packed their meager supplies, Lada paused, her gaze distant. "Semaur isn't just a destination," she said. "It's a chance to rebuild what Telvin destroyed. If we can rally the outcasts, we might have a real shot at taking back Salon." Caleb slung his pack over his shoulder. "Then let's make it count. For both of us." They set out, leaving the shelter behind, their steps synchronized as they crossed the rocky terrain toward the Ash Plains. The landscape grew harsher, the ground shifting from jagged stone to fine, gray dust that clung to their boots. The air cooled as the suns dipped below the horizon, a relief after days of relentless heat. Lada moved with purpose, her knowledge of Salon's terrain guiding them through narrow passes. Caleb kept pace, his eyes scanning for threats. They had dodged patrols before, but the closer they got to Semaur, the greater the risk. Their supplies were holding, but barely, and every step felt like a gamble. As they neared the edge of the Ash Plains, the first signs of Semaur appeared on the horizon, a faint shimmer of stone buildings nestled against the mountains. Caleb's heart lifted at the sight, but Lada's expression remained guarded. "We're close," she said, "but we're not safe yet." They pressed on, the plains stretching before them like a gray sea. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps. Then, as they passed a cluster of low shrubs, a sharp rustling cut through the quiet. Caleb froze, his hand dropping to his utility knife. Lada's eyes narrowed, her body tensing as she scanned the bushes. "What was that?" Caleb whispered, his pulse racing. Lada shook her head, her voice low. "I don't know, but we need to be ready." They stood motionless, ears straining, but the sound didn't repeat. The shrubs remained still, their shadows long in the fading light. After a tense moment, Lada signaled to move forward, but the unease lingered, a silent warning that something or someone was out there. Caleb and Lada stepped through Semaur's gates, the city rising like a fortress from the mountain's heart. Buildings carved from stone loomed overhead, their walls studded with crystals that shimmered under the twin suns, casting fleeting rainbows across the dusty streets. The air buzzed with the clang of forges and the murmur of voices, a community thriving in defiance of Telvin's rule. The inhabitants stared as they passed. Whispers of human rippled through the crowd, laced with suspicion. A child pointed at Caleb, eyes wide, while a merchant muttered to his neighbor, his gaze narrowing. Caleb's skin prickled under their scrutiny, his outsider status palpable. Lada, though tattered, walked with regal poise, her silver markings faintly glowing, commanding respect despite the murmurs. They were led up a winding path to a vast chamber deep within mountain. Ancient tapestries lined the walls, depicting Salon's queens and battles, their colors faded but proud. At the chamber's end, a semicircle of stone thrones held the elders, their faces weathered, their silver markings intricate webs of lineage and wisdom. The air was thick with tension, the weight of history pressing down. "So, the lost heir returns," an elder said, his voice deep and resonant. "But what can you offer us, child? You have no army, no resources. How do you plan to reclaim your throne?" Lada stood tall, her golden eyes unwavering. "I offer hope," she said, "and the will to fight for what is right. Samar has always been a beacon for those who resist tyranny. Together, we can be liberators. Hope is fragile." Another elder snapped, her sharp eyes glinting. "Telvin's forces are vast, his grip on the capital unyielding. What makes you think we can succeed where others have failed?" Caleb's frustration surged. "You talk about failure," he said, his voice slicing through the chamber. "But you've done nothing but hide here. Lada has survived against all odds, and she's ready to fight. If you won't stand with her, then maybe it's time someone showed you what courage looks like." The elders' gazes shifted to him, a mix of surprise and grudging respect. Caleb pressed on, heart pounding. "I'll challenge one of Telvin's lieutenants to a formal duel. In Lada's name. If I win, you'll support her claim. If I lose, I'm just a human, no great loss to you." Silence fell, heavy and charged. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the eldest spoke, his voice grave. "Very well, human. We accept your challenge. But know this. If you fail, not only will you lose your life, but Lada's cause may be doomed as well." Caleb threw himself into training with Samor's warriors, their sparring sessions a blur of sweat and steel. Kale, a burly Selenian, guided him, his gruff voice cutting through the clang of weapons. "Use your speed, human," Kale said after knocking Caleb flat. "You're no match for strength, but you're quick." Caleb nodded, panting, and rose to try again, learning to dodge and strike with precision. On the eve of the duel, Lada approached him in their stone-carved dwelling, firelight flickering across her face. She held out a small, wrapped object. "This is half of my mother's diadem," she said, voice solemn. "It's all that remains of our legacy. Wear it into battle, so our heritage fights with you." Caleb took the fragment, its jagged edge heavy with history, and attached it to his belt beside his utility knife. The duel took place on a windswept plain outside Samar, the twin suns blazing overhead. A crowd gathered, Samar's citizens and travelers from distant settlements, their faces alight with anticipation. General Korvac arrived, a towering figure with cybernetic enhancements whirring softly, his armor gleaming. His cold eyes locked onto Caleb, a smirk curling his lips. Caleb stepped into the dueling circle, gripping a staff etched with Selenian designs, the half-diadem glinting at his side. At the signal, Korvac charged, his energy blades humming with lethal power. Caleb dodged, the blade's heat grazing his cheek, and swung his staff, aiming for Korvac's side. The general blocked effortlessly, the impact jarring Caleb's arms. The fight was relentless. Korvac's strikes were a blur, each blow threatening to shatter Caleb's staff. Caleb landed a hit on Korvac's shoulder, but the general barely flinched, retaliating with a slash that drew blood from Caleb's arm. Sweat stung Caleb's eyes, his breaths ragged, but he fought on, driven by defiance. Korvac disarmed him with a swift maneuver, the staff flying from Caleb's grasp. A brutal kick sent Caleb sprawling, dust clouding around him. Korvac pinned him with a foot on his chest, blade raised. Caleb stared up, unflinching. "Do it," he rasped. "But I stand for something you'll never understand." Korvac paused, his blade hovering. A flicker of respect crossed his face. "You're brave, human," he said, lowering his weapon. "But this is over." He stepped back, turning away. The crowd erupted, chanting Lada's name, their voices a tidal wave of hope. They lifted Caleb to his feet, his body aching but spirit unbroken. Lada pushed through to him, her eyes shining with pride. "You won their hearts," she said. In the days that followed, Selenians flocked to Samar. Farmers, merchants, ex-soldiers, bringing food, water, and intelligence on Telvin's forces. An elderly man approached Lada, his voice trembling. "I fought for your mother. Seeing you here, with this human, gives me hope again." Lada clasped his hand, promising a free salon. Amid the celebrations, a messenger handed Lada a sealed note. It was from Mira, a former royal archivist. The message warned of a traitor within Samar, someone feeding secrets to Telvin. Lada's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. She showed it to Caleb, who frowned. "We need to find them," he said, "before it's too late." The procession swelled as it neared the capital, a growing tide of defiance against Telvin's iron grip. Farmers with weathered faces and calloused hands marched alongside artisans, their tools repurposed as weapons of resistance. Former royal servants, once silenced by fear, now walked with heads held high, their eyes alight with purpose. Old royal banners, hidden for years, were unfurled and raised high, their faded colors catching the light of Salon's twin suns. The sight of the crest, a stylized flame encircled by stars, stirred something deep within the marchers, a reminder of a time when Salon was ruled by justice, not tyranny. Mira approached Lada during a brief rest, her steps hesitant but deliberate. "Your Highness," she began, her voice low but urgent, "I have contacts within the council. They're not all loyal to Telvin. Some are willing to negotiate for a peaceful transition of power." Lada's golden eyes narrowed, her suspicion evident. "Negotiate? With those who have knelt before Telvin? What do they want in return?" Mira hesitated, her gaze flickering to Caleb before returning to Lada. "Your withdrawal from the fight. A promise not to challenge Telvin directly." Caleb stepped closer, his voice. "And you trust these contacts? How do we know this isn't a trap?" Myra's expression hardened. "I've known them for years. They're not perfect, but they're not monsters either. They want stability, not bloodshed." Lada shook her head, her tone resolute. "I won't abandon my people to save my own life. Telvin must be stopped, and if that means facing him head-on, so be it." Mira sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I understand, but if you change your mind, I have a way to reach them." She handed Lada a small, sleek device, a communicator, its surface etched with faint Selenian symbols. Lada took it, her fingers closing around it tightly. "We'll keep this just in case. But for now, we move forward." As they resumed their march, Caleb and Lada found a moment to speak privately. "Do you trust her?" Caleb asked, glancing back at Mira, who now walked a few paces behind them. "Not entirely," Lada admitted. "She was always ambitious, even before the coup, but she might be useful if we're careful." Caleb nodded, his thoughts turning to the future. "What do you see for Salon after all this? If we win?" Lada's gaze grew distant, as if she were already imagining a world free from Telvin's shadow. A Salon where no one is above the law, where power is shared, not hoarded, where outsiders like you are welcomed, not feared. Caleb smiled faintly, a spark of hope igniting within him. That sounds like a place worth fighting for. Their conversation was cut short as they crested a ridge, and the capital came into view. The stone bridge loomed ahead, its arches spanning a deep volcanic fissure, a testament to Salon's ancient engineering. But as they drew closer, a chill ran down Caleb's spine. The bridge was not empty. Figures lined its length, civilians, held at gunpoint by Telvin's soldiers. Lada's face hardened, her voice barely above a whisper. "A trap. Telvin's voice echoed across the chasm, amplified by some unseen device. Lada, heir of Salon, I know you're out there. Show yourself, or these people die. Lada's heart clenched as she saw the civilians on the bridge. Men, women, children, their faces pale with fear, guns trained on them by Telvin's black-armored soldiers. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. Telvin, this is between you and me. Let them go. Telvin's laughter rang out, cold and mocking. Oh, how noble. But you see, they're my leverage. Surrender now, and perhaps I'll spare them. Caleb, standing beside her, leaned in close. He's lying. He'll kill them anyway once he has you. Lada knew he was right. She turned to her advisors, who were already debating their options. Kale, the grizzled veteran, spoke first. The bridge is vulnerable. If we can destroy the supports, it will collapse, taking Telvin and his men with it. But the civilians, Lada protested, her voice sharp with anguish. They'll die too. Kale's face was grim. Sometimes, hard choices must be made for the greater good. Lada shook her head, her resolve hardening. I won't sacrifice innocent lives. There has to be another way. Caleb's mind raced, his eyes scanning the bridge's structure. Wait, what about the maintenance tunnels? Every bridge like this has them for repairs. If we can get through those, we might be able to reach Telvin without crossing the bridge. Lada's eyes lit up with hope. That's it. We'll split into two groups. One will create a distraction on this side, drawing Telvin's attention, while the other infiltrates through the tunnels. She quickly organized the teams. Kale would lead the distraction, using whatever means necessary to draw Telvin's forces away from the bridge's center. Lada, Caleb, and a small group of trusted fighters would head for the tunnels. As they moved toward the hidden entrance, Lada's thoughts turned inward. She remembered the night her mother died, the helplessness she'd felt as a child watching from the shadows. She had been too young, too naive to stop it then. But now she was different. She was the heir, the hope of Salon, and she would not let history repeat itself. She would not sacrifice lives for power, not like Telvin had. With newfound determination, she said, "We take the tunnels. We save those people." The entrance to the tunnels was concealed behind a rocky outcrop, just as Caleb had suspected. It was narrow and dark, but they had no choice. They squeezed through, the walls closing in around them, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and metal. They moved as quietly as possible, aware that any sound could alert Telvin's guards above. The tunnel was claustrophobic, forcing them to crawl in places, but they pressed on, driven by the urgency of their mission. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the tunnel, followed by muffled voices. What was that? One of the soldiers above shouted. Lada froze, her heart pounding. Had they been discovered? Caleb put a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. They waited, barely breathing, as footsteps passed overhead. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds faded, and they continued their cautious advance. But as they rounded a bend, another noise stopped them cold, a low growl echoing through the tunnel's depths. Caleb's eyes widened. What was that? Lada's face paled. Telvin's beasts. He must have stationed them down here. They were trapped between the soldiers above and whatever lurked in the shadows below. The mission had just become infinitely more dangerous. The maintenance tunnels beneath the bridge were a suffocating maze, the air heavy with the acrid stench of sulfur that stung the throat with every breath. Caleb led the way, his flashlight beams slicing through the oppressive darkness, revealing slick stone walls and patches of glowing fungi that pulsed faintly. The heat was relentless, pressing against their skin, and the narrow passages forced them to hunch or crawl, their labored breathing echoing in the confined space. Caleb's technical knowledge guided them, his eyes tracing faded maintenance markers etched into the rock, remnants of Salon's ancient engineering. Keep moving, he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the distant rumble of the volcanic fissure above. We're close to the center. Lada followed, her ceremonial spear gripped tightly, its tip catching the light. Behind her, their 3 Samar fighters moved with grim focus, their weapons ready. The tunnel's walls seemed to close in, the heat intensifying, and Caleb's shirt clung to his sweat-soaked back. He paused at a junction, studying a worn symbol, then pointed right. This leads under Telvin's position. As they advanced, a low growl reverberated through the tunnel, halting them instantly. Caleb's pulse surged, recalling Telvin's enhanced beasts, predators with unnatural senses. "Stay still," he hissed, his hand on his utility knife. The growl grew louder, joined by the scrape of claws on stone. Lada's golden eyes locked with Caleb's, a silent agreement forming. They couldn't fight here. The space was too tight. "Go," she urged, and they scrambled forward, the tunnel narrowing to a crawl space. The beast's pursuit was relentless, its snarls echoing closer, but the team pushed through, desperation driving them. They reached a rusted ladder leading to a hatch. Caleb climbed first, shoving the heavy cover open with a grunt. Cool air flooded in, and they spilled out onto the bridge's understructure, concealed by its massive stone arches. The beast's growls faded, its size too large for the tunnel's confines. Caleb leaned against a support, catching his breath. "We made it," he said, voice shaky. Lada's expression was steely. "Not yet. Telvin's up there." They crept along the bridge's underside, shadows cloaking their movements, until they found a hatch directly beneath Telvin's forces. Lada signaled the team to hold position. Then she and Caleb climbed up, emerging silently behind the enemy lines. The bridge was a scene of terror. Civilians, men, women, children, stood in rows, guns trained on them by Telvin's black-armored soldiers. Telvin himself dominated the center, his energy sword humming with lethal power, his voice booming through an amplifier. "Lada, I know you're out there. Show yourself, or they die." Lada stepped into the open, her presence commanding despite her worn appearance. "Telvin," she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Release these people and surrender. Your reign ends now." Telvin spun, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "You're a fool, girl," he sneered, raising his sword, its blade crackling with energy. "You'll die like your mother." He charged, the sword slashing in a deadly arc. Lada sidestepped, her movements fluid, honed by years of royal training. She thrust her ceremonial spear, its tip grazing Telvin's armor, forcing him to parry. The clash of metal against energy sent sparks flying, the sound reverberating across the bridge. The duel was a whirlwind of skill and fury. Telvin's cybernetic enhancements gave him brute strength, his strikes powerful enough to crack stone. Lada countered with precision, ducking under a sweeping blow and landing a hit on his thigh, drawing a grunt of pain. He roared, retaliating with a flurry of attacks, each met by Lada's deft blocks. Caleb watched, his heart in his throat, gripping his knife, but knowing this was Lada's fight. The civilians' eyes were fixed on her, their fear giving way to hope as she held her own against the tyrant. Lada's movements grew sharper, her confidence surging. She feinted left, then spun, her spear striking Telvin's wrist, sending his sword skittering across the bridge. He stumbled, desperation clouding his face. "You can't win," he shouted, lunging at her. Lada sidestepped, using his momentum against him. "For my mother," she said, her voice cold and resolute. With a powerful thrust of her spear, she drove him back, forcing him to the bridge's edge. Telvin teetered, arms flailing, then fell, his screams swallowed by the fiery fissure below. The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of relief and triumph washing over them. Lada turned to the soldiers, her voice ringing with authority. "Drop your weapons. The tyranny is over." Most complied, their guns clattering to the ground, hands raised in surrender. But a handful of Telvin's cruelest lieutenants tried to flee, shoving through the crowd. The civilians, emboldened, formed a human barrier, their voices united in defiance. "No more escaping justice," a young man declared, standing shoulder to shoulder with others. "You answer for your crimes." The rogue soldiers were subdued, bound by the crowd's collective will, their fate to be decided later. Lada scanned the bridge, her chest heaving, then met Caleb's gaze. A weary nod passed between them, a shared acknowledgement of their victory. Their moment was interrupted by a messenger in council robes, his expression formal but tense. "Your Highness," he said, bowing low. "The council demands your immediate presence." Lata's brow furrowed. "For what purpose?" The messenger's eyes flicked to Caleb, hesitating. "They have conditions for your rule. One concerns the human's presence on Salon." Caleb's stomach tightened, a chill running through him. The council's demand hung in the air, a new threat looming over their hard-won triumph. The grand hall of the Solanian council loomed like a relic of the past, its vaulted ceilings adorned with intricate carvings of Salon's matriarchal queens. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the polished stone floor. At the far end, a semicircle of thrones awaited the council members, each seat a symbol of entrenched power and tradition. Lada stood before them, her posture regal despite the fatigue etched into her face. Caleb stood slightly behind her, his presence a quiet anchor. The council members, cloaked in their formal robes, regarded her with a mixture of deference and suspicion. "Princess Lada," began the eldest counselor, his voice echoing through the hall, "we acknowledge your claim to the throne. However, there are conditions." Lada's eyes narrowed, her voice steady but sharp. "Conditions? What conditions?" The counselor continued, his tone measured but firm. "For the stability of Salon, it is imperative that our traditions are upheld. The presence of an outsider, especially a human, could undermine the purity of our bloodline and the trust of our people." Caleb's jaw tightened, but Lada raised a hand to silence him. "You mean to say that Caleb must be exiled?" she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. The counselor nodded, unflinching. "For the good of Salon, yes. His presence could be seen as a foreign influence, which we cannot afford at this critical juncture." Lada's fists clenched at her sides, her golden eyes blazing with fury. "This is discrimination. Caleb has fought for Salon, risked his life for our cause. He is as much a part of this world as any of us." Nevertheless, another counselor interjected, his tone dismissive. "The people may not accept a human in a position of influence. It could lead to unrest." Lada took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew this was a test, a way for the council to assert control over her reign. But she had come too far to bend to their will now. "I will not exile Caleb," she declared, her voice ringing with finality. "He has earned his place here, and I will not turn my back on him." The counselors exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "Then perhaps," said the eldest, his voice heavy with implication, "you are not ready to rule." Lada's gaze swept over them, her resolve hardening. "I am ready to lead Salon into a new era, one where power is shared, not hoarded. I propose a reformed council with representatives from every region and class, ensuring that all voices are heard." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some counselors looked intrigued, others outraged. "This is unprecedented," one protested. "The council has always been composed of the nobility." "Times change," Lada countered, her voice unwavering. "Salon must adapt or perish. I will not rule as a tyrant, nor will I allow the old ways to strangle our future." She turned to address the gathered crowd outside the hall, her voice rising with passion. "People of Salon, for too long, you have been silenced by fear. But today, we stand on the brink of a new dawn. I offer you not just a queen, but a partner in governance. Together, we can build a Salon that is just inclusive and strong." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a tidal wave of hope. Lada reached into her pocket and pulled out the remaining half of her mother's diadem. With a swift motion, she dashed it against the stone floor, the crystal shattering into 1,000 glittering fragments. "The old ways are broken," she proclaimed, her voice ringing with conviction. "Let us build something stronger." The cheers grew louder, a chorus of unity and defiance. But amidst the jubilation, a group of nobles in the back of the hall exchanged dark looks, their whispers lost in the noise. The ceremony took place in the heart of Samour, in a chamber carved deep into the mountain's core. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls were draped with ancient tapestries depicting Salon's storied past. A circle of elders stood around a stone altar, their silver markings glowing faintly in the dim light. Lada stood at the center, holding a small vial of silver ink. Caleb knelt before her, his head bowed, the weight of the moment settling over him like a mantle. The elders began to chant, their voices weaving a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the very stone of the mountain. "Caleb of Earth," Lada intoned, her voice steady and commanding, "you have proven yourself a friend to Salon, a warrior for justice, and a beacon of hope. Today, I bestow upon you the title of Bearer of Honor, a mark of your service to our people." She dipped her fingers into the vial and traced a small silver line on his forehead. The ink was cool, tingling slightly as it settled into his skin. Caleb felt a surge of emotion, a sense of belonging he hadn't known since his family's death. "Rise, Caleb," Lada said, her voice gentle but firm. "Rise as one of us." Caleb stood, meeting her gaze. There was pride in her eyes, and something deeper, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared journey. After the ceremony, they walked together through Samor's streets, the city alive with celebration. Banners of the old royal crest fluttered in the breeze, and the people greeted them with smiles and nods. "You don't have to stay," Lada said softly as they paused by a fountain. "You could return to your own world, start over." Caleb shook his head, his voice resolute. "This is my world now. I found something here that I never had before, a purpose, a home." He touched the data crystal around his neck, its scarred surface a reminder of his past. "This used to remind me of what I lost. Now, it reminds me of what I've gained." Lada smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her features. "Then we'll build this new salon together." But as they spoke, a messenger approached, his face pale with urgency. "Your Highness, there's been a message. It's anonymous, but it speaks of a plot within the council, someone working against you." Lada's expression darkened, her mind racing. "Who can we trust?" Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady. "We'll figure out. Together." Salon had transformed. The capital, once a bastion of oppression under Telvin's iron fist, now pulsed with life. Markets teemed with vendors hawking goods from every corner of the planet, their voices a symphony of commerce and community. The streets, once patrolled by Telvin's enforcers, now echoed with laughter and the footsteps of free citizens. The city's lights, no longer dimmed by curfews, cast a warm glow over the bustling metropolis. Lada stood on the balcony of the royal palace, her gaze sweeping over the city she had fought so hard to liberate. Below, the Grand Hall hosted the newly reformed council, a diverse assembly of representatives from every region and class of Salon. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, still challenges, but it was a start. A step towards a Salon where power was shared, not hoarded. Caleb joined her on the balcony, his presence a comforting constant. As an advisor, he had thrown himself into the task of bridging human and Selenian technology, his expertise invaluable in rebuilding the planet. He held up the data crystal, its scarred surface a testament to his past, but now a symbol of hope. "I think it's time to let go of the past," he said, his voice soft but resolute. Lada nodded, understanding. "We've come a long way, Caleb, but there's still so much to do." As they stood side by side, a sense of peace settled over them. But peace, they knew, was fragile. In a shadowed chamber, a group of nobles gathered, their faces set in determination. "She's weak," one murmured. "We can use that." But Lada and Caleb were not alone. The people of Salon, united under their new leadership, stood vigilant. They knew that rebuilding would not be easy. The challenges lay ahead, but they were ready. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the city. Lada turned to Caleb, her eyes reflecting the light. "This is just the beginning," she said, a smile playing on her lips. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Salon entered a new era, one of hope, unity, and the promise of a brighter future.